All right, everybody, we are thrilled to welcome back to the program once again for a third time the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, who's facing sentencing this Monday for a matter which we're going to learn more about right now from the man himself. Let's welcome back to the program Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Chairman, great to see you again.
Thank you so much. It's good to be with you. Just wanted to express my appreciation to you and this platform for giving us access to people who otherwise we wouldn't be able to talk to. So thank you.
It's our pleasure.
It's our honor.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And we hope this is not the last time we talk to you for a while, but you do have sentencing coming up on Monday. Now, I want to get into some news here because this strikes me as good news here. Judge says no prison in Uhuru Russian conspiracy case. It was political speech. So this is an article in the Tampa Bay Times from Monday about a fourth defendant, who I guess is separate from you guys in the sense that he's no longer part of the Uhuru movement. This says U.S. District Judge William Young sentenced an ex-member of the St. Petersburg activist group to probation, noting the case was rooted in free speech. A federal judge said Monday that he is not inclined to give prison time in the case against members of the St. Petersburg-based Uhuru movement who were convicted in September of conspiring to act as Russian agents. In a sentencing hearing Monday for Augustus C. Romaine Jr., a former member of the black activist group and one of the four convicted defendants, U.S. District Judge William Young said their conduct ultimately amounted to the exercise of free speech. Everything they did here was political speech, Young said. I eminently disagree with all of it. These people spit on this flag that actually protects them. That's his opinion. The judge sentenced Romaine, 38, to 5 years probation, declining the 5-year prison sentence prosecutors had sought. He said he believed there had already been enough punishment in the case. The prosecutors did not comment on the judge's sentence, but looks of disappointment crossed their faces as Young explained his reasoning. Young nevertheless commended the prosecution team for their skill in handling a difficult case. He said he believed the trial produced a fair result. At the same time, the judge said the law requires wide breadth to be given to political speech, quote, or it gets chilled. We have to go a long way to make sure we're not punishing you for saying repulsive words, he told Romaine. So you and Penny Hess and Jesse Neville were on trial for acting as Russian agents. Now, you were found not guilty for that. However, you were convicted on a lesser charge of conspiracy. So that is a confusing verdict, which I understand you intend to appeal. Your sentencing is this Monday, the 16th. This article is about a sentencing for a fourth man who was given probation this past Monday. So in whichever order you'd like, would you like to speak to the verdict in the trial and your expectations for Monday's sentencing hearing, given this headline that we just read through?
Well, I think that there's a bit of the Tampa Bay Tribune being a bit disingenuous in the sense that it is a newspaper that's quite familiar with me in particular, quite familiar with the Uhuru movement. It is based in a city, it was founded in a city that I was born in, that I grew up in, that I was involved in tremendous amounts of struggles for 50 years, more than 50 years. So they know who I am. They've always known who I am. And so to discover some validity in what the judge is now saying, it just seems a bit disingenuous. I worked for that newspaper as a younger man. I was the first so-called copy boy that worked there. I was the second person who worked as a proofreader for that newspaper. I was the first person who worked in the composing room for that newspaper. So they knew quite well who I am. And I think also what we're looking at is part of a profound contradiction in terms of speech, the sort of self-censorship that we've seen happening with most of the colonial media in this country, where the government would put me on trial for speech And they said that it had to do with national security and threats to the security of the United States, but they won't say anything about it. Only time they'll say anything about it is they will put forth their opinions and treat that as news with the arrest itself. And now they learning something from the judge in terms of this characterization of speech, free speech, as it relates to the other case. So I just wanted to make that comment. And I think it's really important because I think it shows in part why we see the diminishing influence of the ruling class media in this country. And nothing made that more manifest than the just presidential election, where all of the bourgeois media came out, did everything they could to elect Harris to no avail. And what people relied on instead was mediums such as what we are dealing with right now. People had to go around the ruling class media. And so this is one of the reasons I really appreciate being able to be here, because people want more than what they can get from the Tampa Bay Times. In terms of the sentence given to Romaine, I do guess that there's some significance. Certainly, perhaps Romaine was able to recognize that, but even like a 5-year sentence for speech does seem to me to be a bit of a contradiction, to be able to recognize that it's free speech that we're looking at on the one hand, but 5 years probation. So maybe it says something about what would happen in our case. I don't know. You mentioned that Romaine is someone who was once a member of our organization some years ago. His politics quite different now. He's a very bright man, and I thought he did a good job in the courtroom in putting forth defense for himself. For a while, he acted as his own lawyer, and I thought he did a pretty good job doing that and raising questions that were really important. But I don't know what to make of his sentence with what we are approaching now, because even though they talked about it as being a conspiracy that involved Romaine and Russians and the Uhuru Three, the fact is, I think it's possible to see a clear distinction between the cases and the attitudes of the prosecution as it relates to the cases. We were on trial at the same time in the same courtroom, sitting close proximity to each other. But I think the Uhuru Three was an outstanding feature of the trial. So I don't know how to read that. I don't know if we can read that accurately or not.
Do you have the same judge? Is the same judge going to
It's the
preside
same
over your
judge.
sentencing?
It's the same judge.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my next question, because he seemed to at least pay some lip service to the idea of free speech in this ruling, yet he did sentence to 5 years probation. Is there a minimum sentence that goes with your conviction? Did he have to give them 5 years? Did he have to give either probation or jail time? Could he have been more lenient if he wanted to, or was this the minimum he could have granted?
I don't think it was the minimum. The thing about these charges and something that seemed to perplex the pre-sentence investigators for a minute is that there are no guidelines for this charge.
Okay,
and
so
that's
there's no
because it's unique, and that as I understand it, there's no one who has been charged under this law for purely for speech. There's never happened before. This is one of the things that made it relatively contradictory. So there's a lot of room that was given there. I don't know if the judge would have been permitted to allow Romaine to walk without any kind of sentence, or if there was a minimum sentence he could have achieved. I should know. I'm sure it's been talked about, but I just don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, because at first glance, looking at that and seeing no jail time, struck me as a good outcome. Even though in principle, I don't even understand what the crime is. Do you want to talk a little bit about the verdict? Because you were found not guilty of being Russian agents, yet you were found guilty of conspiring with Russia to sow discord, which, as I understand, meant you had contacts in Russia and you printed some of their opinions on your website. Which
It
seems
meant
to me that is practicing political speech. I don't understand how, in a country with a First Amendment, that is a crime. Now, the judge also cited that in Romaine's case, he didn't know that his activities required him to register as a foreign agent, which that was very confusing as well, because if you're found not guilty of being a foreign agent, why would you have to register as a foreign agent?
Right.
And so then why is this a conspiracy charge? To me, the verdict makes no sense. It can only be explained by confusion on the jury's part. Do you want to speak more to that? And I understand you're fighting the verdict. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think there was confusion on the part of the jury in terms of the foundational charge of being agents of Russia. And we sat there in a courtroom, and the prosecution had access to 2.5 million books in terms of its equivalency of 13 terabytes of stuff. I don't know anything about that, but that they had taken from us. So they had tremendous amount of that. And they had 14 witnesses, no people. 12 of them were FBI agents. 2 of them were people who they hired who claimed to be experts on Russia. And the wild thing is that with all of that, none of them could say that we did anything that broke the law. In fact, they were asked explicitly whether or not, because the overt acts we allegedly were involved in included coming out on the side of Russia in terms of the Ukraine issue, that we worked to take the United States to the United Nations for violating the crime of genocide, according to UN declarations, that we ran elections for reparations. These were part of the overt acts that they said we were guilty of having committed. And all of these were acts initially said that Russia paid for, Russia was responsible for. And yet we are in court, and our lawyers asked the lead FBI investigator if, in fact, there was any Russian interference in the elections that where we were concerned. She had to say, no, there was none. The lawyer said, then, this came out of a Justice Department press release. Why, how does this happen? She said, well, I had nothing to do with it. But the lawyer said, you're the lead investigator. You were there. You knew what it said. You never said anything about it. I mean, so up and down the line, the lawyer said, well, is protesting opposing the U.S. war in Ukraine, is that something that should be considered a violation of the law or something to that effect? And she said, no. Is all of the stuff that was involved, they had to say there was no evidence of anything. There was no evidence of that. So it boils down to, and we didn't produce a single witness. What we had access to was the fact that the prosecution had used photos, had used videos. They had a presentation that I made in Moscow. And in every instance, when I'm in Moscow, I'm saying the reason I'm here is to let the world know the conditions of Black people in this country, and that we are looking for support from the world around this question. And these are at conferences, that non-governmental conferences, that organizational conferences that happen in Moscow. All of that was shown to them. They went back to the 1970s and showed how, with our newspaper, that we always and explicitly came out in opposition to genocide, explicitly said that we want reparations for African people. And they showed how, from the history of our newspaper, more than 50 years, we've opposed virtually every war that the United States government has been involved in, declaring that we don't believe the United States is capable of participating in a just war. And so, this is what we were able to do. So the jury, despite the fact they had dismissed the only African juror because she was late, I think, on the 5th day getting back, the jury disagreed that we worked for Russia. and which meant that objectively they understood that we work for black people because we don't work for Russia. And everything they they said that we have done, we did in the process of struggling for liberation of African people. So that was what should have been a dilemma. But what the prosecution, it has the last word in terms of the closing arguments. They misstated the law, which, in and of itself was problematic because the law is a political law. It was created a political crime, even from its origin. It's an iteration of a law that was created in 1917, subsequent to the Russian Revolution, the whole anti-colonial movement that was characterized by Garvey around the world and other peoples, etc. So this is the law that we had to deal with. But even with that, they were not able to say that we committed any act. And so, and that left them with a conviction that had to be characterized as a thought crime. They said that we didn't, they convicted us of doing something that never happened. They convicted us of conspiring for something that never occurred. They said this never occurred, but they convicted us of conspiring for it. So that's the situation we're left with, and we think is extremely dangerous because part of what it does, it means that this is the thing that we were really concerned about from the very beginning, that it would make it illegal for African people to protest our treatment in the United States. I mean, This is the place you're talking about, and look at the time frame we're talking about. They said this happened sometime around 2014 up until 2022, where police were obviously killing black people around the country. We end up ultimately with George Floyd, rebellions every place, etc. But we can't criticize the United States because to do so means that we in the employ of Russians. The United States is wonderful. Everybody knows that. And we got Kamala Harris and Barack Hussein Obama. And so therefore, we are peculiar and working for Russia. We have no agency of our own.
Now, you mentioned the Trump election. Now, I said throughout that if Trump actually assumed the presidency, I had to reevaluate what I believed about the deep state, or I had to reevaluate what I thought about Trump. Now, since the election, he's appointing a real wrecking crew of people who, in many ways, contradict the things that a lot of the MAGA supporters, and we have a lot of them in our audience, said they were for, including freedom of speech. He winds up appointing this AG, Pam Bondi, who says she wants to use the FBI to question pro-Palestine protesters, which of course she defines as anti-Semites. You got a guy nominated for the FBI who says we don't prioritize Israel enough. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that's a very dangerous combination, two people with those views. So do you think under the Trump administration, speech is going to be more protected, which a lot of people who supported Trump believed? Do you think it'll be less protected? Do you think it'll be about the same? Do you think this administration will be as likely to bring cases like this, more likely, or not at all?
I think it's a possibility of it achieving more protection, but it's a possibility. That's all, because the fact is that I hear the criticisms of Trump and what he has said, et cetera, but Trump has said things, but Biden and the Democrats have done things. I mean, Trump, the criticism of Trump, I mean, the same people who are telling us that Trump is going to make an assault on democratic rights and free speech, et cetera, it's the Democratic Party who did this thing to us. It was Biden who did this thing to us. It was Biden who wrote the ominous crime bill that gave it to Bill Clinton, who put 100,000 cops in the street. And that was a statement that he was making to white people in this country, that he was going to stop black people. And, so that's what they did. And so Trump may do something similar, or he may even do worse. But the problem that we see is that colonialism is bad. And to have liberal colonialism or left-wing colonialism or right-wing colonialism, colonialism is colonialism is colonialism. And what we mean is that what has happened to African people is that our right for self-determination has been taken from us, robbed from us, and sometimes they do it under a system that they call integration and segregation and Jim Crow and slavery. All of those things are just terms that speak to the fact that Africans do not have control of our own destiny. And so that's what we're about. That's what we've been fighting for. And that's why we haven't been so confused, we think, about whether it's Trump or Biden. We have tried to pay attention to it because there is some significance, possibly, because, as you know, it was Clinton who started this Russia stuff. It was Clinton who was the first election denier, who said that Trump didn't win the election, Russia won the election, Russia. And it was that administration that did everything they could to make sure that Trump could not govern, and actually resulted in people going to jail and threatened with jail, et cetera, because of this connection to Trump and the Russia question. So that's where that came from. And, even, when we talk about what the possibilities are coming from Trump, we know the reality that has come from the Harris, the Biden, the Democratic Party, et cetera. That's real. And so we're not afraid of shadows. What we are concerned about what's happening in the real world. And when I'm facing 5 years in prison for talking, this is not from Trump. This is from Harris and Biden and that crew. So, we have, we're not hung up on that thing. We don't think that there's no alternative except the Democratic Party. Woe is us if the Democratic Party should lose power, if Trump should come to power. Our problem is woe is us. Doom is ahead, not because whoever is elected, if we don't have power over our own lives. And that's the fundamental question that we've been struggling for. And I think that's the reason I'm facing 5 years in prison right now and a $250,000 fine.
Now, if you look at how nonsensical the charges are, it seems like they bring charges like this really as a way of intimidating people out of speaking on certain subjects.
Yes.
And certainly the Democrats have been masters of that while hiding behind a wall of virtue signaling. Do you feel going forward you're going to be more hesitant to speak on certain issues after this experience? Do you think other people will be?
I'm hoping not. I'm hoping people will not be more hesitant. I'm hoping part of what we've found ourselves having to do is act as a bulwark against this assault on free speech. And it's not because we think that we are so much more heroic than anybody else, but the fact is that we remember that even in 1791, when the U.S. Congress did adopt the Bill of Rights and First Amendment, et cetera, we were property as Black people. We've always been in the vanguard of the fight for free speech. We've had to be in the vanguard because we had none. While there were others white people who may have presumed the right to speak and say what we want, we couldn't. We were property. And so that's the thing that thrust us on the front lines of this question, even in the 1950s. And I'm reminded how people, many people, especially liberals, Black and white, talk about Trump being a proto-fascist and this kind of thing. But even in the 1950s, during the McCarthy era, when many members of the Communist Party and what have you ran for cover, and for good reason. You had the execution of Julius and Julian and Rosa Luxemburg and what have you.
The Rosenbergs.
What did I say? Luxembourg? That's another. They were executed too, by the way. But we had a situation, and people have said that we should be fighting against fascism. But the thing is that what kept the society open was not a fight against fascism. It was Ella Baker. It was Fannie Lou Hamer. It was the civil rights movement. That's the thing that kept fought and won the democratic space. So even as they were shutting things down, the Black movement in this country was winning universal suffrage. It was on the front line of the struggle for democracy and democratic rights. And I think we had to do this. So it's not like, wow, these are heroic people. The fact is that, look, Emmett Till, I'm the same age as Emmett Till was when he was murdered for, they say, whistling at a white woman. You talk about free speech. So, and I lived as a young person, constant fear of the possibility of somebody snatching me up. My mother was concerned. This is what I grew up with, because this was happening all the time, especially young Black men. And so we had to fight for free speech, and that's the way it is now. So it's not, I'm hoping that we are able to hold the line. And I'm hoping that we can set examples for people to fight. And you mentioned something that was said about Romaine's sentence, about this being a matter of free speech. But the only reason that has even come into the discussion is because people did not take plea deals and decided to fight, to go and fight about it. Otherwise, we'd something to just be in prison. It took them 9 months after an indictment, took them 9 months after the attack on us, the military assault on us, before there was even an indictment. And then even after that, they offered a $10 million bounty for anybody who would come and bring them information about the Ironov and the Uhuru movement, etc. They got nothing. For all of what they've done, after the investigation that went over 2 or 3 years, and with the 50-year history that they have at their command of our movement, they got not a single person from the movement, even people who used to be in the movement, who would come up and said that we work for Russians or foreign agents, we are foreign agents or anything. Got nobody. And that's the reality that I think speaks to who we are and what we've always been. And like I said, the Tampa Bay Times, they knew who we were, you know. In fact, I lost my job at the Tampa Bay Times during the March on Washington because I was intent. It wasn't a March on Washington. It was after the Meredith. It was the Meredith March when James Meredith had decided he was going to walk across Mississippi and march against fear, and he was gunned down after making, just a few steps. And I said, the civil rights movement, people come in to Mississippi to finish this march. And I went to bosses at the Tampa Bay Times and said, I'm making this march. I want to leave of absence to go do that. And they told me that, no, you can't do that. That if you really want to help your people, you just stay here and work real hard and set an example for your people. And that didn't work out. And they said, if you go, you'll never be able to work here again. And so, they know who I am, and they engage in self-censorship. And that's what we're looking at. Think about this. I mean, I appreciate so much this platform and this discussion we're having, because it's not a platform that necessarily knows the details of anything that happened with us. But some things. Something about the history of this relationship, that Black people did not pop up on plantations on the collard green leaves or something like that. We were brought here against our will at gunpoint, and the treatment of African people is notoriously horrible. I mean, just beastly, etc. You know that. The New York Times, they know that. How can they treat this case? How can they treat me? How can they treat the Uhuru Three as these weird people who had to work for Russians in order to fight for freedom? We would be weird if we were not fighting for freedom. If we were Barack Hussein Obama, or if we were Kamala Harris, we would be really weird. And that's what they want to do. And they want to Obama-size us so that we become, acceptable forces. But we shall criticize our treatment, and we shall oppose unjust wars. We will do that. That's our responsibility. Look, we came out against this war, and now we've come to a place where U.S. weapons, long-range rockets, are being used to fire into Russia that even threatens the possibility of nuclear conflagration, and yet we are the ones who are the problem. This is an extraordinary kind of situation, So anyway, it's Orwellian.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we are we are looking to sort of spruce up the show a little bit in the new year. So we're looking for a new slogan. I think "We know some things" might be the new motto of the show. We know some things.
We know some things.
We know
Yes.
some things. So you guys are organizing an action on December 16th outside the courthouse. Is that correct?
Well, we're doing more than that. We're asking people to come because it's a political trial, and the people are the most critical factors in this kind of situation. And you raised earlier the question of whether or not people will have the courage to continue to fight given the attack that's being made on us. And I think that's going to be a demonstration of the willingness and the courage of the people, because there are going to be hundreds of people who come to that trial. As on December 16th in Tampa, Florida. And then on December 15th, the Sunday, there's going to be a rally in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is right around, right across the bridge. And that was one of the places that was raided by the police, by the FBI as well. So we're asking people to come out, go to handsoffuhuru.org, get information about coming to the court in Tampa on December 16, get information about coming to the rally in St. Petersburg, Florida on December 15th. And we'll see you there because we believe the people are powerful. And so thank you so much.
All right. Well, we'll be waiting with bated breath, and we'll be watching on Monday. Good luck to you, and we'll be in touch either way.
Thank you. Thank you, comrades.
Please clap.